Public Health Education Librarian for UNCG University Libraries. The libraries and the University Teaching and Learning Center, or the UTLC, collaborated on making a series of webinars for the UNCG community on online learning and innovation. This is the 5th webinar for this series, so if it's your first time joining us, welcome. If it's not, then welcome again. In this series, different UNCG instructional technology consultants, ITS staff, and faculty will cover topics on online learning pedagogies, UNCG instructional technology tools such as Canvas, Google, Box, WebEx, etc., and more. These are typically 30-minute webinars, but today's session is a special topic that we will cover in an hour. We understand if you need to leave. This will be recorded if you can't stay the whole time. So all of these will be recorded and they'll be placed on this library guide, which I am putting in the chat. We will also give the recording file to the staff member or faculty member presenting the materials, and then they can put it where they see fit. So I'm going to cover some logistical things about how this webinar is going to run. Please mute your audio during the presentation by clicking the audio icon next to your name to turn it red, but feel free to turn the audio back on by clicking the audio icon again at the end of the webinar to participate in a conversation with the presenters. If you do not have a microphone, you're also welcome to participate in the chat. Right now it's set that you are chatting me privately, but you can change it to everyone if you want everyone to see your question, but I will field the questions and let people know how it's going. You know, stop the presenter if I feel like it needs to happen during the middle of the session. So I will track those questions either, like I said, privately and put them in there. So if there's any technical issues during the webinar, feel free to email me. I'll have my email up there, or you can call me at my office and let me know what's going on, and I'll try to talk you through some issues. So that information is in the chat as well. So at this point, before I introduce the presenters, does anyone have any questions? Okay, so I'll assume that means everyone's good to go. So today's session is on academic integrity, Canvas, and ways to avoid violations. This webinar is being presented by Amanda Shipman and Matt Libera, both from UNCG Information Technology Services, or ITS. This session will be 1 hour based on that it's a topic of interest and will be presented in 2 parts. And we're going to start with Amanda and Canvas. So again, like I said before, we understand if you need to leave early, and this is being recorded and will be put on these guides later for you to watch. So now I'm going to stop sharing this nice little flyer, and I'm going to hand the presenting abilities to Matt. Are you ready, Matt?
Yep, I'm good to go.
So you want me to hand it to your laptop?
No, just go ahead and hand it to me. I'll run the slideshow while Amanda talks, and then I'll cover my portion as well.
Here it comes.
All right.
Thanks, Sam. I'm just going to give her a minute to let that load. As Matt mentioned, he's running the slides while I start talking, so apologize if it's not quite on cue, but we'll go with it. So as Sam mentioned, my name is Amanda Shipman. I'm an ITS, and Matt is here with me, Matt Libera, who's also an ITS. We both do Canvas administration. So I'm going to start off talking about specifically Turnitin in Canvas, and Matt's going to talk a little bit about designing and setting up quizzes in Canvas to deter cheating. So just a little bit, you know, every teacher dreads it, the academic integrity violation. Mostly the confrontation with the student, the time that it takes to gather evidence, just all the hassle of it all. So hopefully Matt and I can help you with this and provide some information and tips which will allow you to avoid those violations, and if not avoid, deal with them efficiently. And I'll just say real quickly, again, I'm going to briefly talk about Turnitin, and then Matt's going to talk in detail about Canvas quizzes. And I'll say we've kind of deemed him the expert on these academic integrity violations. He's been lucky enough to go to numerous academic integrity, what are they called, cases or They're not trials, but you know what I'm talking about. So he's been the blessed one here to be able to do that. All right, if you want to navigate to the first Turnitin slide, Matt. Next one. All right. So if you weren't aware, we do have Turnitin available for everyone to use in all courses. It's primarily used for its originality checking feature, but there are other tools available in Turnitin. For example, you can use Feedback Studio, which is a grading tool that's very similar to SpeedGrader. There are some advantages to using Feedback Studio. We won't go into a lot of detail, but Feedback Studio does include a comment bank where you can store comments to place into the text of a student's paper. So it may save a little time, but as of now, I'm finding that most people continue to use SpeedGrader to grade papers even when they're using Turnitin. If you have any questions about Feedback Studio and want one of us to work with you, I'm happy to do so. So if you'll just open up a 6-tech ticket and it'll get over to us. But use of Turnitin, if you've ever used Turnitin at any other university, you may have gone directly to the Turnitin portal and logged in there and used it. But here at UNCG, it could be done entirely through Canvas on a per assignment basis. Basically, instructors set up Turnitin-enabled assignments in Canvas, and then students submit work to those assignments, and it therefore generates a similarity report. Those similarity reports are available to the instructor via the Turnitin assignment inbox. When you set up a Turnitin assignment, you'll see the Turnitin inbox within the Canvas assignment. You can also and you'll actually see an image of the Turnitin inbox right here. So you'll actually see this in your Canvas assignment if you're using Turnitin. You'll also see the similarity score in a Canvas SpeedGrader, in the Canvas SpeedGrader. So if you're at the top right of SpeedGrader, for those of you who've used it, you'll be able to see the similarity score and click on it to open up the similarity report. So if you're looking at the inbox right here on the screen, if you click on the similarity score, that's going to open up the report for you, and then also make available to you Feedback Studio and the other Turnitin tools available. As far as students viewing the similarity report, it's entirely up to the instructor as to whether or not you want them to see this report. And we'll talk more about what the report is and how you can choose for them to do that. Next slide. All right, so some of you might ask, what exactly is my students' work being checked against when they submit it to Turnitin? So there are basically 3 types of databases which are used for comparison. And actually in the Turnitin settings, when you set up an assignment, you can choose not to use any of these 3 databases. But for the most part, the default is set, so it's going to check each of these type of databases when students submit work. I'm not entirely sure of the scenario right away where you wouldn't want that to happen, but the default is that all of these databases are checked. The first type of database is the web, which they call the current and archived web. I would consider this comparable to taking the text of a student's paper, throwing it into a Google search, and then seeing what is publicly available out there on the web, which the student's work may match against. Wikipedia would be a good example of this. And according to Turnitin, there's about 62 billion web pages from the current and archive web that's available out there, which they're searching against. The second type of database is the student repository, which consists of all student work that's submitted through Turnitin at all institutions. This is not just UNCG, so it's searching for matches, although, you know, a lot of times if students are reusing work, a lot of the matches are going to be here at UNCG, maybe in another course that you're teaching if students are reusing work and passing along to other students in the same course. But this database is going to consist of over 734 million papers. And according to Turnitin, they say that it grows by nearly 200,000 papers a day. So there's a lot of data out there that it's looking over. And according to Turnitin, interestingly enough, they say that over 50% of plagiarism comes from other students' work, which is a little surprising to me. I would have assumed the web, but this is according to Turnitin. I'd have to do a little more research to see what other folks are saying. The last type of database that is searched are what they label content partnerships. But this consists of periodicals, journals, and other digital publications. So this would be akin to searching the text of all the libraries, journals, and all of their databases. There are over 160 million articles in these databases for Turnitin. So that's just a general overview of what your students' work is being compared to when they submit through Turnitin. Okay, Matt, you can go to the next slide. So the Similarity report, this is what you're after usually when you have students submit to Turnitin. And once Turnitin has had enough time to process the paper, this is what you get. Generally, they're returned in about 15 minutes after submission, but according to Turnitin, may take as much as 24 hours. The report provides a match overview, which is a breakdown of all the matches that have been found, ordered by the highest similarity score to the lowest. And these might be a combination of sources, might be websites and other students' papers, and a mixture of things. It's important to note that the similarity score is not an assessment of whether or not the paper includes plagiarized material. It's just text match. So it requires human intervention. You have to look at the paper and review whether students have properly cited sources, whether they're using a lot of direct quotes. It doesn't do all the work for you. I get that question a lot. And there are some settings you can tweak and turn it in to try to make it a little smarter, but for the most part, it's still going to require you or some other human to review that report and actually see what's going on. Next slide. So like I said, Similarity Index is not a plagiarism index. Human intervention is required. The index is not, just keep in mind, no score is inherently good or bad. 0% for a similarity score doesn't necessarily mean that everything is okay with the student's paper, and 75% doesn't necessarily mean that the student should flunk. You have to look and decide what's going on here. I did have one additional note that kind of corresponds with the previous slide about paper view requests. If one of those matches that comes up in the match overview is actually, if the source is another student's paper, whether it's another student here at UNCG or at another institution, you can actually submit a paper view request. And what this does is Turnitin will generate an email and send it to you, as well as to it'll send it to you and then allow you to then forward to the instructor. It'll tell you who the instructor is of the source, which was a match. Because what will happen is initially you won't be able to see the full text of the other student's work, whomever submitted the original paper. So you'll forward that email request over to the instructor, again, whether it's at UNCG or some other institution. And then it's up to that instructor to then be able to respond and send you the full text. And they get an email as well with the full text of the paper in it, and they just simply forward it to you. Seems a little confusing. I'm not doing a real good job with describing the process, but it's really self-explanatory once you get in there. So if you want to see the full text, that's something you'll have to do. It's not going to be immediately available to you in Turnitin. So one thing that I talk with folks about is using Turnitin as a teaching tool versus what I call a gotcha tool. And a lot of people use it that way and I call it a gotcha tool because they just are immediately, they want to use the tool just to immediately find students that plagiarize and punish them. But I try to think of it and help them think of it as a way to use it as a teaching tool to help students understand what exactly they're doing wrong. And one of the things I looked into in looking and doing some research to help understand why students plagiarize, and maybe that will then encourage you and others to use this as a teaching tool instead of just a gotcha tool. So interesting enough, these are some of the reasons I found. The first being, and I hear this all the time, many students do not know that they are plagiarizing. And in the age today, with all the digital information available to us, I think that makes a lot of sense. They think simply by rewording what they've read on Wikipedia or some other source that they're not plagiarizing when they actually are. Some students know what plagiarism is, but they don't consider it wrong. Not sure I can reason that one, but but that is something that's come up. Students are natural economizers. They're just and they're have poor time management and planning skills. They wait to the last minute. They're just trying to get something done fast and easily. So these are some reasons. And then some students fear that their writing ability is inadequate. So in an effort to try to improve their own writing, they're copying what they see off someone else's. So those are some reasons. I think some of those make a lot of sense and would give me at least enough reason to want to use Turnitin as a teaching tool instead of just a gotcha tool. And another reason you might want to do this, and I'm going to tell you what to do right now, is this enables, so what a lot of instructors want to do or allow their students to do is to submit their work to Turnitin before they actually turn it in for a grade. So this is a way that we can do that. So if you go to the next slide, Matt, we'll talk about setting up a Turnitin assignment as a draft assignment. So you'll actually set up two separate assignments here. You'll set up a draft assignment, which is going to provide the student multiple opportunities to submit their work to Turnitin to check for plagiarism. And then you'll have a separate assignment with some different settings that you'll set up for the final graded submission. So if you want to give students an opportunity to check their work and to use this as a teaching tool, you're going to want to set up these two separate assignments. And maybe you do this for your first writing assignment, maybe you do this for all of them, that's up to you. But what you'll do is when you're in Turnitin, setting up an assignment in Canvas, here are the settings that you'll want to pay attention to. And these are settings that appear in Turnitin after you've saved the Canvas assignment that you've just set up. The first is do not store submitted papers. This is just going to ensure that that draft version or versions that students are submitting to Turnitin, they aren't stored in the student paper repository. So when they submit again, it's not a match against itself. So that's the first thing you want to make sure you do when you're setting up a draft assignment. If you want to go to the next slide, Matt. The next is when you're looking at the similarity report settings, you want to allow Turnitin to generate the reports immediately. The other option is that it actually waits to generate the report on the due date. We don't want to do that. We want to generate the report immediately. And then in this same option, you allow students to resubmit until the due date. So they can continue to submit to Turnitin and tweak their paper, rewrite, do whatever they need to do and keep checking it multiple times. After 3 submissions, though, it does slow down and take longer to generate the similarity report in between those submissions. And lastly is you want to make sure in the settings that you allow students to view the similarity reports. Again, I mentioned earlier, it's entirely up to you whether or not instructors sometimes that are using this more of a gotcha tool, they may not allow students to view the similarity reports, but in the way that I'm talking about using this as a way for them to check their work, you need to make sure that setting is checked off. And that's basically it as far as setting up a draft and giving them an opportunity to check their work. The last slide here is just a list of resources for Turnitin. The first being, if you go to Turnitin's website and their support resources, it's kind of all over the place. They give you a lot of details of accessing Turnitin outside of Canvas. So instead of going to Turnitin for this information, the folks at Canvas or Instructure have done a great job with documenting this process. So creating a Turnitin assignment, the instructions are here. There are also instructions for how students submit a Turnitin assignment, because I'll be honest, it can get a little tricky for students, and it's not difficult, it's just different than what they see when they're submitting a standard Canvas assignment. So I think it is helpful for students to have this information. And then some information, additional information on interpreting a similarity report is here as well. And these slides, I'll make sure they're shared so that you'll have access to these URLs. And lastly, I just wanted to say that I, in conjunction with Anita Warford, the ITC, or Instructional Technology Consultant in the College of Arts and Sciences, we're actually doing a workshop in February on plagiarism in Turnitin. So we'll go into much more detail with setting up these assignments in that workshop. So if you want to join us in that workshop, feel free to sign up there. And again, we'll share the URLs with you guys so you'll have them and not have to copy them down right now. And that's it for me right now. I'll hold questions, and there'll be an opportunity at the end to ask questions, but I'm going to pass it over to Matt Libera, who's going to talk about something I actually find a little more interesting than Turnitin, but he's going to talk about quizzes in Canvas and setting up quizzes to help deter cheating.
Sorry, Amanda, before you start that, we did get a question of when you were talking about the students being added into the databases, and when they submit their papers to Turnitin, they then asked, do you have to let students know that their papers are being added to that database as part of their participation in the course?
I don't think so. I believe we have something in our, because we had to do this when we first adopted Turnitin, there's something in the, what is it, when you accept the, when you activate your computing accounts, you're accepting, I'm trying to think what it's called. You put me on the spot. What is it? It's not terms. It's whatever you're agreeing to when you activate your accounts. Here at UNCG, when you're activating your email, Canvas, on those, there's a little message in there about that your work may be submitted to Turnitin. So legally we're covered. I'm sure it's, and there's some other stuff in Turnitin's website that I was reading about how fair use and copyright, they're covered by fair use. So I don't think you have to necessarily let them know because they're covered in that account activation piece, but I think it's probably a good idea.
And then we had another question. Do similarity matches only flag exact text matches in Turnitin, such as what happens if students just change the order of the words?
It really depends on the settings that you've put in there. So you can exclude small matches, so I think that would affect whether or not. But if you don't exclude small matches, yeah, it's going to be small exact matches. So I think, depending on how much they've reworded it, that's going to be up for, it may or may not come up. I wouldn't be able to speak to that, how well it can detect that.
Okay. And the last thing is that when you were talking about plagiarism, I did just want to say, because I think this is a little different than like quiz strategies that Matt's going to talk about, but the library does have tutorials on plagiarism, and they're online, so even if it's an online class, you can just like link it in your course, because like Amanda was saying, in our experience, a lot of times students don't think they're plagiarizing, they just think it's okay to copy and paste some things, so keep that in mind as well. And I'll put some links in here to the workshops that Amanda referenced, as well as some of these tutorials we're talking about.